Over the years, I've done a number of videos discussing the auction houses of the United States sell fakes and copies and what they sell for and what's wrong with them and so forth. And we're going to do another one. This is another in the series. And if you're a new collector, a fairly new collector, meaning you've been at it for less than 5 years, you want to pay attention. On the left is a copy of a Qinlong vase. They've made numerous examples of these over the years. They turn up in auctions fairly often, and they sell for anywhere from a few $100s to a few thousand. On the right is a showroom of a manufacturing plant in China where they make a lot of copies. And as you can see, these are just the pieces you can order. You can order multiples. You can order as many as you want. It's pretty disturbing. We're going to take a look at some more recent examples that have sold and compare them to authentic pieces. So here we go. This is a jar that's for sale right now in China that can be bought for, if you buy 20 of them, you get them for 140 bucks a piece. And it, of course, is a reproduction of a very famous type of jar that was originally produced during the Yuan dynasty. And it's a very rare type. It's one of the most desirable patterns that they ever did. And here it is. And these kinds of pieces turn up. Here's a picture of the bottom of it. It's pretty convincing looking, I suppose, to a lot of people. And they slip through and they sell for good money sometimes. And this jar, were it authentic, would sell for literally in the millions of dollars, probably 5 to 8 million or something like that. And in this case, you can pick up the repro and, and have that instead, I guess. But this will illustrate just how good the copies are. This is a pretty good copy, all right? And then you come over to this. This is another company over there that sells things. And what I wanted to show you on this was we often get into a discussion of labels. You'll find porcelains on the internet that have old labels on the bottom. Well, these are pieces that are currently in that factory that you can order. The pair, they're fairly large. The pair is about, you can get them for 440 bucks a piece if you order 50 of them. Or if you order 2 to 9, you can get them for 480 a pair, or about $240 a vase. But I want you to pay close attention to the bottom. All right, what do you see on there? You see old collector labels that look pretty convincing, including one from Spinks in London. There was a legendary company that was in business up until the 1980s. I believe it was bought out by, I think Christie's bought out their archives and so forth for all their records. They had some fabulous records and paperwork on their collections and photographs of things that they'd sold over the years. Some absolutely great pieces. And it was a good way for Christie's to get that information so they can get in touch maybe with some of those collectors to see if they ever want to sell anything. But this will illustrate to you just how far they go. So this is done at the factory. These labels, often people think, oh, they're added when they get to America. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're added right at the factory level. And this is an example of it. All right, and then getting over to some pieces that have sold recently. Before we get going, I want to talk about this a little bit. This is a fake of a Kangxi vase. If you're looking at auctions and you see this kind of layout with a picture of a Chinese gentleman and all this packaging, so to speak, run for your life. Run for your life, okay? There is not an army of Chinese Americans or Chinese people in China that can export their collections to the West to be sold. So if you see a listing and then there's a photograph of a collector in the upper right-hand corner, and if it's included in the image, this is a very common packaging technique they do in their advertising, and you want to be extremely careful of it. In this case, they've not only shown the vase, but they show a line drawing indicating that this was archived and was part of the imperial collection or something like that. It's all nonsense. They make them up. They package these very slickly in large numbers and ship them to auction houses in the U.S. They go to one auction house, and what doesn't sell there gets shipped to another auction house, and they move around almost like gypsy collections, using the same photos from auction house to auction house. There was an auction of some pieces down in Georgia, I recall. Many of you saw it, and it was depicted a bald gentleman, an American that was supposed to be from that area. He had this massive, supposedly massive, very important imperial collection, and they sold a bunch of it. It was either at Lauren Galleries or Eden Galleries. Both of them get involved in these shenanigans. And then they ended up being, pieces ended up being re-offered out at an auction house in California with the same photograph, the same story, the same pieces. This is how it works. So when you see a thing like this, run for your life. Don't even think of buying it. Were that an authentic Kangxi vase with a rain mark on the bottom, it wouldn't have sold for $2,200. It would have sold for tens of thousands. All right. The point is that this is a copy, and this piece was sold for $2,250 plus the buyer's premium. So it probably ended up costing the poor buyer. Well, I'll tell you what it was. The buyer's premium is 25%. So he ended up paying somewhere around $2,800 for this piece, and it was back in just 2 years ago, in October of 2024. And there are many, many of them at any given time. If you go to Live Auctioneers or Invaluable, you'll have no trouble finding a lot of examples of these. And then you have this. Now, this is a copy of a very, very famous type of Yuan Dynasty blue and white. And it's fairly well done. I have to give them that. Here's a picture of the bottom of it and so forth. And this was peddled by Lauren Galleries. Okay, they're back in it in Marietta, Georgia. And went for $425. All right. And they listed it as Yuan blue and white plum vase. It is a plum vase form. They're correct about that. And but they're calling it Chinese Yuan Dynasty blue and white vase. There's a whole bunch of written down there. But they are declaring it to be of that age. That is fraud. That's flat out fraud. But unfortunately for the collector world, as most of you know, local and state governments have little interest in doing anything about it. And the state of Georgia is particularly lax, as is the state of Florida, and as is the state of New York, as is the state of California. Those are some of the biggest offenders, though there are many others. They just don't want to get involved with it. Were this vase authentic, it would have sold for a much larger sum. And I'm going to show you one that sold at Sotheby's. It was nearly identical for you to compare. Hold on a minute. Go up here. There it is. There's the vase. This is a real one. That's an authentic one. And this sold at Sotheby's. When did this sell? This sold. Wasn't that? I don't think it was that long ago. November. Came from the Myrna Myers collection, and it sold in 2021. There you go. It wasn't that long ago, and it sold for 378,000 pounds, which in U.S. currency comes out to about $460,000 roughly, give or minus, depending on what the exchange rate was at the time. So this one sold for $468,000. It was a real one. It came from a known collection. They were both about the same size. And this one sold for $425. So it's not a huge amount of money, but somebody got taken for it because it's basically a table lamp base at this point. Okay, that's all it is. But now we're going to get into some others that sold for even more money. All right, you have this. This is a copy of a Ming Longquan Celadon barb rim charger. These are very desirable among the collecting community. And there's a number of things that give it away right off the bat as not being authentic. Celadons are green, but this dark green that you're seeing, this forest green, pine tree green you see on these, this is a typical color they've been using on copies now for about 15 years. I started seeing them back in around 2010 and 12 during the boom in the big boom in the Chinese art market when it really took off. And these were turning up literally everywhere. And the back of it is very slickly done for one of these. That is a very good reproduction. It is a reproduction, but it's extremely slick. What gives it away is the decoration, the glaze, the color of it, and so forth. But this bottom looks awfully, awfully convincing. And if you come over here to this is a real one. Now that one sold for $1,800. This is another one. This sold for $125,000 in 2021. And here's the back of it. Nearly identical. This, if you're a Celadon collector, this would make you very nervous. All right, this is a real one. And if you compare the backs of these dishes, they're almost identical. The rust line on this one's a little bit bigger. And the reason these are turning out this way is that they are finding the similar types of clay, and they're finding ways to create this red line, this iron oxide line, and on the back, so that when it comes out, it looks just like the originals. You want to be very, very careful. The big difference, of course, is the overall color of the piece, and I suspect, though they don't have any really good photographs of the decoration, really. Well, there you go. That's not bad. If you're going to look at the decoration, you're going to find it a little bit off. You're going to find it a little bit off as far as the style of the drawing goes and how it's executed. But in general, they've gotten very good at it. And it's eventually going to get to the point where in the market, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. This was one of the best fakes I've ever seen as far as the back of the plate goes. It's very convincing. And they're getting better and better at it all the time. And this one was peddled out by Roswell Auctions down in Georgia, near Marietta, near Lauren, Eden, and Roswell. And there's another one down there. I don't know if they're in business anymore. They're all within 10 or 20 miles of each other, as far as I can tell. And all they sell is fakes. I mean, this isn't pretty much. I mean, occasionally they sell a piece of rose medallion from a local house or something, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, the high-end stuff, it's all imported reproductions, as far as I've been able to tell over the last 10 years since we started focusing on them. So you want to be very careful, but this is a very classic case. And then you get over to this, a yellow Chinlong Marken period bowl that they sold. And here's a picture of the bottom of it. Pretty convincing looking, Mark. Well done. The potting of the bowl isn't bad. The yellow is a bit it's a bit off. And it's got incise decoration, or sgraffito as they call it. Here you go. And sold for $2,000 on a $2,000 to $3,000 estimate. And that means that in the end, somebody paid probably, $2,600, $2,700 for it, right? The buyer's premium is 28%. This was at Roswell. And I'm going to show you a couple of authentic pieces to give you some idea how far off they are. All right. Okay, here's one. This one sold at Christie's back in 2022. It went for 44,000 euros, which is about $50,000. Very, very similar mark. All right. You'll notice some differences, though, in the foot rim on this one. It's got a little bit of an iron oxide line around the inside, which rarely appear on the copies. And the mark is drawn just a little bit better, more proficiently than the other ones. And the shape of the bowl is good. And when you pull it in and you look at the glaze, you see things like the pooling. When the glaze runs down off the rim, it thickens up a little bit under there and pools up again down here at the bottom and then at the feet. All right, and those are the kinds of things that you look for when authenticating objects, but it's awfully close. It's awfully close. Like I said, the yellow on the other one isn't quite the same egg yolk tone. It's a bit too yellow, but it's pretty close. And then there's another one here that's a brighter yellow. It's a stronger yellow, but it's a different tone of yellow than that one. There is a difference. This one still has a hint of that egg yolk in it. It has no incise decoration, and it sold in 2004. Okay, 22 years ago, it sold for 5,900 pounds. This was right before prices really took off. It was estimated at 3,000 to 4,000 pounds at the time, and it ended up going for 5,900 pounds, which is probably about eight or so $1,000 back then on the exchange rate. Now, after this period, after 2004, when they got into 2008 and 9 and through about 2014, the prices of Chinese porcelain went up in multiples. In many cases, 300-400%. The prices were crazy. But this was a piece that sold before that, and it still sold for $8,000. This one sold for $2,000, and it was a total copy, and that was sold very recently. This was sold in January of this year down at Roswell's. All right. And then I'm not picking on Roswell. There are a dozen other companies out there that do it. But these guys seem particularly good at getting the pieces sold for more than $10. A lot of the fake auction houses, you'll see when you look at the price results, that nothing sold from the auction, and they keep running them. You'll see maybe one lot sells, two lots sells, but nothing else, because many of them, I believe, they're just sharing images on computers and doing it that way. Sometimes the objects aren't even in the U.S. They have to get them from overseas once the piece sells and have them sent to you. All right, now here's another example of an extremely rare Yuan Dynasty type blue and white jar. They make a lot of these. They turn up all the time. I get, through the inquiry service on the website, I get pictures of these sent to me a couple of times, 2-3 times a month. Somebody gets trapped in one of these or sees one in an auction and wants to know if I think they should buy it. And they look just like this. This is typically how they look. Sometimes the blue and white's a little better on them. Here's a picture of the foot rim on it. And you'll notice that the foot on this one is very similar in style to the first one we looked at, this one. And if you come over here and look at it, hold on a second. Back and find the foot on it. It's got, there it is. It's got the very same sort of flattened out wide foot. All right. That's sort of typical what you see on these. And there's this one, very similar. And they may have been even made in the same place. I'm not sure. I don't know that, but it's the way they make them now. And this one was sold at Lauren Galleries. And this one was sold at, I bet, Lauren also. Lauren Galleries. So that hints to me that they're probably coming out of the same factory that are making them. I can't say for sure because you don't know, but that seems to be the case anyway. And then you have this is an authentic one. Now it has a lid on it, which often they don't have, so it makes it this one a little bit better than most. It sold it back though in 2004, 22 years ago, because today this vase would be up into seven figures. Sold for £341,000. 22 years ago. All right. 341,000 pounds. That's about $450,000. This one just sold for 2,750 plus the premium, or around 3,500 at Lauren Galleries. And they listed it as an authentic piece. They're calling it a Yuan Dynasty jar. Again, it's a crime. It's illegal. It's fraud. It violates the UCC code, I suppose, and every other thing. But nobody does a thing about it. And if you go through this sale, you'll find a lot of it. Now, I have been hearing from somebody, this is interesting as an aside. If you are a Chinese national and you're watching this, or you're in China, or you have a friend in China who have bought these fakes, what I learned from a fellow in China very recently, who's been emailing me a little bit, he said that if you're in China and because these companies sell on more than just Live Auctioneers and Invaluable. They sell on a lot of sites in China that we never see out here. They're behind the firewall, a lot of internal Chinese websites. If you bid on those and buy one of these fakes through those websites, you can go to the authorities and they can go after them for fraud, apparently. This is what the fellow was telling me. You go to a police station, you fill out a form. There's a Chinese government agency that will go after them if this website who's selling these pieces isn't being diligent in what they're allowing to be sold, especially if they've been notified of cases of fraud. So it's something to think about. Maybe a way to help limit the marketability of this stuff. He gave me the name of it, and apparently it's well known over in China. So there's a starting point for people. All right, now moving on to this. This is an extremely rare type of Kangxi period water pot. It's rather well done. This was sold at Lauren, not a surprise, and it sold for $375. And those of you that collect these Kangxi pieces, these scholars' objects, know how much these sell for. But if you don't know, I'm going to show you. Here's one that sold in 2025, just last year, for 6,300,000 Hong Kong. And that works out to about $800,000 US. For those of you in the United States, about $800,000. So this one was sold as a Kangxi 3-color water pot, $375 plus the premium. This one sold, the authentic one, this one sold for 6.3 million Hong Kong, which works out, like I said, to about 800,000. And then there's another one that sold in 2024, slightly different pattern between this one. Okay, you always have to pay attention to the patterns. This is a better one. This is also a very good one. All right, this one sold for about 130 or 40,000 US. And this one is nearly identical to the other one. It's a little bit lower in profile, but the pattern is extremely similar. We're going to look at the two, compare them. There's this one. It has a light red, light pinkish sort of enamel on it. It's very nicely painted. The workmanship on these are quite exceptional. The potting is good and so forth in general. And here's the other one, and it has a rain mark on the bottom. And the big difference here is that this one is a slightly more compressed, smaller form, and it sold for 3,365,000 Hong Kong, which works out to about $420,000 in U.S. currency. Again, these pieces are fakes. All right, And I know people like to go into the market and think that they'll be lucky, they'll find something. These are great rarities. And most of these rarities, the on pieces, the Kangxi scholars objects, the really great pieces were long ago found and discovered and put into major collections. And the people that own them are well aware of what they are. And when they go to sell them, they're not going to send them to a company like Lauren or Roswell or some of these outfits out in California. They're going to send them right to New York to a major auction house. They're going to go to Christie's or Sotheby's or Bonhams or Freeman's or Doyle's. They're going to get the exposure there. That's where the stuff is going to sell. So if you go, it's like an auction. It's as implausible as an auction somewhere in the Midwest turning up with a massive horde of Pizarros and classical paintings that are worth tens of millions of dollars. It's not gonna happen because everybody that owns them already know about it. Their lawyers know about it. The estates know about it. They follow the market. The auction market is extremely smart, and people that own great things generally know that. I'm not talking about things that are worth a couple of $1,000s or so, but I'm talking about things when you get into serious money, 50,000, 100,000, $1 million. These pieces are not given to small name auction houses to handle. They go to the major brands to do it. In London, they'll go to the same auction houses there. You might go to Woolley and Wallace or Drew Eats, those very well established auction houses to handle sales. There's several of them over there that are quite good, certainly on a par with any of the big, what we think of as the big auction houses. That'll get the same money, but they're not going to send them to Joe's Podunk, that sells cars on the side. He's got a real estate business, and this sort of thing. The other thing you always want to do too is check the website of the company selling this stuff. If you go to Lauren Gallery's website, and a lot of them don't have websites to begin with. They're strictly on live auctioneers. It's all internet based, but there's always an address on there, and you should always do a Google image search of the address. And I've found vacant lots as addresses for some of these companies. I have found abandoned warehouses for some of these alleged companies. I have found apartments and condominium complexes that are supposedly auction houses. So you can do a lot of that. And if you see a major looking auction turning up on the internet and the stuff is being offered by somebody that lives in a duplex in a rundown neighborhood, you can forget it. It's a scam. It's a scam, and you're about to be taken. All right. And then we hop along over to this is the last one, sold for $3.3 million. Then we get into this tea-dust glaze. This is a tea-dust glaze vase with a Guangzhou mark on it, which is a pretty rare bird. They don't turn up very often. And this was sold just last year, the fall of last year. It sold for $650. This was sold by Lauren, of course. And here's a real one. All right, that's a nice one. And this one sold 14 years ago. It's 16 years ago, and it went for 17,000 pounds on a 4,000 to 6,000 pound estimate, which means it sold for about $24,000. And today that base would bring at least that and maybe a little more. All right, it's not going to sell for $650 ever. It just isn't. It just isn't. And it's fairly convincing looking when you look at it and so forth. But the bottom of it is they intentionally muddied up to make it look like an old one, because that's something you sometimes see on the bottoms of these vases. They would put a lighter glazed area here where the mark would sit, and the mark is pressed into it. All right, and this is one of them here. This one is done, doesn't have the staining on it, but it's the same general effect. That's what it is. And sometimes, though, in the kiln during the firing process, this area, the light area, can get a little bit muddied up. That's not impossible. Doesn't have a big impact on the value either, just so you know. But it does make a tiny bit of impact on it. But the vase is still the vase. And if the vase is beautiful, the beauty of the vase will override any concerns about the mark. But this is another one of these classic cases. But somebody paid good money to buy that fake. And then when you get into these moon flasks, many of you have seen these. This is a brand new moon flask. And I'm not even going to bother. It was sold by Roswell's or Lauren or Eden or, one of those companies in California. I forget which one it was. But it was estimated at just $2,000 to $3,000 with an $1,800 selling result plus the premium. So it ended up selling for about $2,500, $2,600. All right. but it's a total copy. And those of you that have been collecting know how rare these moon flasks are and what they bring. But I'll just show those of you that are a little bit new. Here's one that sold at Christie's. Let's see, in December of 2010, 16 years ago it sold, and it sold for 18 million Hong Kong, which is around $2 million US, roughly, 2.5 million US. This is a real one, and they haven't gone down in value since. Really, the prices have maybe leveled off a bit, but this one sold for a huge amount of money, and this is what they're worth. And you'll find other examples that also sell for this much as well. You're in that price range, anywhere from $1.5 to $3.5 million roughly. But this is another classic case. But somebody was out $1,800 thinking they got the real thing, and they didn't. They got taken. All right, and then over to this, the water pot. There are a lot of these water pots around. They are extremely rare. This is a Kangxi, in the style of a Kangxi water pot with underglazed red decoration with underglazed blue. And those of you that have been collecting for a while know that underglazed blue and underglazed red done successfully is a very tough stunt to pull off back in the early 1700s, all right, during the period. But this one is extremely well done. I want you to really look at this. It's very, very convincingly done. It's the flower here in the front's a little bit muddy, but in general, they did a very good job with it. They got the mark on the bottom and all this, but I guarantee you, if you look inside this, it's just as clean as could be. It's probably just like a brand new pot. But the coloring, the potting, and everything is fairly successful on this, and it should be alarming. Here's the bottom of it. Narrow foot rim and so forth. The foot isn't quite right on it, and the mark is a little bit strong, but it's convincing if you haven't seen a few of them. All right, and it's sold for $1,600. What are they worth if they're authentic? Well, they're worth a lot more than that. Here's one here. This is a very, very similar example. We'll go back and forth a little bit to give you some idea. All right, this is the fake, and that's the real one. Now, the real one is a little bit brighter in color. It's a little bit brighter in color and so forth, but you'll notice the flowers are done a bit better than on the copy. The copy is a little bit, the drawing is a little bit muddy and not that well done, but it's not bad. And here's this piece here. This is very, very convincing work. Okay, it's very, very convincing looking. There's the red is good, the blue is good, and all this, but this one sold for 7 million Hong Kong, or just about $1 million in 2013. All right, and they had, not many have turned up since. They do not turn up very often in the market. The Kangxi Scholars wares were made in very limited numbers. They're extremely rare. They're extremely valuable, and they're absolutely coveted by their owners. There are a number of famous collectors over the years that have had them, but this is an extremely good one. I don't remember if they give the provenance on this thing. Okay, for the Yun family collection in Hong Kong, sold at Christie's in 2000, and then it was sold in Hong Kong again at Sotheby's in 2005. And I suspect it was sold and then resold again so quickly because there was a sudden rapid increase in the market around 2005. That's when it really started to ramp up. It was under full swing by 2008 and 9 and so forth. And then it came back in 2013, sort of at the end of the boom cycle. And it still brought just about $1 million back then. All right, and that's a heck of a price. But here are a bunch of these pieces I was telling you about with these photographs. These are all fakes. This is all fake stuff. The vase is fake, all of it. Everything on this page is a fake as far as I can tell. So this was an auction from I forget when this auction was, or which outfit did this one. Just find out who the auctioneer was. Harvard's auction, located in Boston, Mass. All right, and this was in 2017. I happen to know Harvard's auctions. It's no longer in business, but they got away with selling some pretty good volumes in dollars of copies back then. This was actually this iron underglazed copper red piece that we were just discussing was sold by Treasure House Inc. in California. again, one of these corrupt California companies. And somebody has this at home right now, and I'm sure they think it's a holy grail, and they're planning their pensions around, part of their pension, probably their retirements around it or something, and they're going to be so horribly disappointed when they go to consign it at one of the big auction houses and they get told it's an absolute copy. And there will be a big fight, there always is, and it'll be a real mess for somebody. But those are the kinds of things you want to watch out for. And here are a bunch of water pots. This is on the, whose site is this? This is the Christie site. And you'll see under water pots in recent results, there's only 65 of them on there. And there are many different forms, including the beehive form with the copper or in white and so forth. All right, and underglazed green and so forth. These are the kinds of things that how often they don't turn up very often. And this is one of the rarest of the rare also, this little pot at the top. But that just give you a quick look at what's going on right now in the market. The market is no safer now than it was 5 or 6 years ago. The forgers are getting better and better at it. They've been heavily branching out into paintings. Paintings have become a very big thing among the forgery market because Chinese watercolors that could be very convincing are very easy to produce. And if you heard anything about the poor Poly group over in China, they got some angry people right now because over the years they've sold so many copies of paintings by famous Chinese artists. About half of what they sold over the years are fakes, roughly 50%, somewhere around there. And it became a real problem. Guardian was a little better. They were a good bit more careful, but Poly Group was taking in anything that people would leave off. They'd put any name on it that you wanted, and they had an unpaid for rate for some of their sales at one point. They were approaching 50% of the people that bought things would then have it looked at by somebody that knows what they're doing. They would tell them the piece is a copy, and that people just don't pay for it. And Poly Group, as many of you know, Poly is owned by the Chinese government. It's a government auction house, and the Poly Group is how they fund the military. They own insurance companies and shipyards. It's a government-owned series of basically a government-owned conglomerate. But one of them they own is this Poly Group, and they got into all kinds of mischief and all kinds of corruption for selling fakes and copies. And it's sad because they also sold some very good things over the years. They sold some great rarities over the years, but they also have been pretty shady in some of their dealings. But that's a whole other thing. But the point is that the painting market, the jade market, the bronze market, the Tibetan bronze market is flooded with fakes right now. That maybe more than almost. For its size of the market, the amount of Tibetan and Thai and these bronze Buddha figures are being mass produced, are being produced by very good workshops in Asia, in Nepal, in Tibet, and they're turning up in auctions in particular in these corrupt auction houses, but as well all over Europe. There's one auction house in particular I can think of that's in the area of Austria that seems to have a never-ending supply of Tibetan bronzes. And I don't want to say who it is, but because I'll end up getting another cease and desist order from somebody. But that's the kind of thing that's going on. There are factories making them. They are blatant copies. And these bronzes are turning up constantly. You'll see some sales that have maybe 30 or 40 of them or 50 of them. And it's not one of the major auction houses who've been building up for that sale all year, or they got a major collection from a private collector. These are from all kinds of different sources, apparently. And they're all suspect. Most of them don't bring anywhere near what they're really worth if they were authentic, but they keep offering them. I'm seeing them in France. I'm seeing them in a few sales in England, but England isn't too bad. England seems to be sort of keeping an eye on that stuff. But in the United States, it is an endless problem. It's an endless problem. And there are, right now on the report card for the live auctioneers and the auctioneer site that we keep over on Bidamount for the subscribers, right now there's 475 auction houses on there, 490. And about 80% of them get an F for selling fakes in the United States and in Europe. Okay, 80% are known to sell fakes. That's a staggering number, and only about 5% of them have the slightest idea what they're doing and do work diligently to keep fakes out of their sales. Only about 5% of the auction houses. And that's why when we do our weekly videos, somebody said to me, you always focus on on certain auction houses. I focus on them because they're the only ones worth focusing on. And it's a fairly short list, sadly, these days. But that's the nature of the beast. So all I can say in closing is, if you're interested in collecting and you're interested in getting involved in this market, you exercise extraordinary caution. Get validation. If you've never physically seen or handled some of these objects before, get some help with it. Go to people that know. Do not ask the auction house unless they're a highly recognized expert at the auction house. And the only auction houses in America that have highly recognized experts are I call the real five big ones. Christie's, Sotheby's, Bonhams. Doyle has somebody that's pretty good. Freeman has somebody who's good. And that's it. The rest of them don't. They don't have a Chinese expert on hand. They don't have a porcelain guy. Bronx does a great job because they have very good sources, but they don't really have a Chinese person in-house yet. Leland Little has brought somebody in who's getting quite good at it and doing better and better, but it's a long learning curve, so you have to be fair about it. But Bronx and Leland Little and these places, I believe they're on the up and up. And there's a few others, Stair Gallery and so forth, but it's a very short list of trustable auction houses these days. In New England here, we have a few of them. We have Grogan's, we have Devin Moisen, we have Smith's, and we have, what's his name, in Maine, out on the point there. And I can't think of the name because I've been talking too much, but there's some of them that work hard at trying to do it the right way, and there are many that just don't care, that often sell fair bits of Chinese stuff. So just be extremely careful. All right. In closing, thank you for watching. Check carefully. Buy books. Buy reference books. Join museums. Do all that. Do all that. And do your due diligence before you buy, not after you buy it. All right. Because once you buy it, you cannot get your money back. Very important thing to always remember. If you buy something that's a fake, even on a credit card, you cannot get your money back ever. Ever. Okay? And that's just the way it is because of the seller's agreements, the way they're worded. And you will not get your money back, and the credit card company will not help you get your money back. So once you commit to it and you buy it, you own it. Even before it's delivered, you can't get out of it. All right? That's just the way it is. So be very, very careful out there. All right. Have a great week. Subscribe here if you haven't. We'll be back tomorrow with a regular weekly video. And thanks for watching. All right. Bye-bye.